Okay, hi everyone. My name is Rohit Bhargava and I'm part of the startup team at AWS, where our mission is to help grow the quantity and quality of startups and founders coming out of Australia and New Zealand. We are extremely excited to have teamed up with the Innovation Bay team to deliver this as a weekly content series that will run every Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. and are delighted to have Rachael Neumann interviewing 99designs CEO Patrick Llewellyn for our first episode in this series. If you aren't already familiar with Innovation Bay, it is the longest running community group for tech startups and investors in Australia. Their mission is to support founders on their journey from idea to IPO and beyond. They run events and programs across the country and now online, all focused on helping a community of over 5,000 founders, people working in startups, investors, and others to learn, connect, and grow. If you're not already a member, sign up at innovationbay.com. Before I hand over the mic to Rachael to kick things off, I wanted to let you know how the sessions will run. We will start with around 35 to 40 minutes of Rachael interviewing Patrick before we jump into questions from you. Please submit any questions you have into the Q&A tab, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. I'll jump in at the end to facilitate this part of the session. We also have the chat function running so you can engage with others in attendance. Please be considerate of others whenever speaking through these channels. With that out of the way, I'll hand over the mic to Rachael to kick things off.
She needs to unmute.
Hi, everyone. I'm off mute, and I'm Rachael Neumann from the Amazon Web Services team. Welcome to our webinar series, where we're going to dive deep with our startup leaders across Australia, New Zealand, and beyond, and hear how they're navigating through these unprecedented times. This week, we are delighted to welcome Patrick Llewellyn, CEO of 99designs, which is the global creative platform that makes it easy for designers and clients to work together and create designs that they love. Founded in Melbourne in 2008, in the height of the GFC, the business has grown from a small forum to a global network of designers, paying out to date over $250 million to its community of creatives. Now, Patrick joined in 2009 and shortly thereafter moved to San Francisco to oversee the US and international expansion. In 2011, he was appointed CEO, where he has guided the organization through years of tremendous growth, including growing a global team of nearly 200 people and raising over $45 million in capital investment led by Excel Partners. So we're here now to uncover how Patrick has helped turn an idea into a global business, and then more recently, how he and the team are responding to the current crisis and adapting to new ways of living and doing business. I've had the pleasure of knowing Patrick as a colleague and a friend for many years now, even renting a few desks off him back when we launched Eventbrite in Australia in 2014. It is my absolute pleasure to join Patrick today for this chat. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you for having me, Rachael.
Yep. So Patrick, I want to go back to the early days. So back in 2009, when you joined 99designs, I know at that time I was graduating business school in New York City, had a front row seat to see the collapse of the financial sector in the US crumble around me. Meanwhile, you're back here in Melbourne, helping to get 99designs off the ground and then scaling overseas. So many people talk about some of the most innovative ideas and companies are actually formed in some of the worst economic conditions. So around the same time that you stepped into 99designs, you had Airbnb being born in August 2008, you had Uber a few months later in March 2009, and here you are taking up the helm at 99designs. So talk to me about leading a company in the heart of the GFC and what that was like.
I think we had it was twofold for us. Not only were we born in the GFC, but we were Aussies at a time when, you know, the funding environment in Australia was very different to the one that we find ourselves in today. So I think what that meant, that when we joined, we were bootstrapping 99. And we bootstrapped the business for the first 3 years. So we kind of brought that really lean, innovative approach to how we built the business. You know, we weren't spending money on marketing. We were spending money on engineering whenever we could, on building the best products we could, and really just focusing at the cusp around this community of designers that we had and trying to match them with work the best way we could. And, you know, really it was around those iteration cycles, getting feedback from customers, adapting, getting feedback from designers, adapting, not really worrying about spending money to acquire customers. We really focused on, you know, word of mouth being the driver. So it was about, you know, customer satisfaction, customer support, delivering good outcomes, delivering on a promise. And then, you know, we rode that wave for quite some time.
Now, Patrick, was that a deliberate decision? Was that always the intention when you started out that you would be bootstrapped, that you'd go through word of mouth, or was that a necessity based on the constraints of the time?
A bit of both. We've certainly, one of the things that's always been great about 99 is we helped a lot of early Silicon Valley companies get their first brand identity. And so it meant that we were on the radar of a lot of US-based VCs. And so ultimately Excel Partners are our investment partner and have been amazing for us over now 8 years plus. They, and along with a bunch of other people, actually preemptively reached out to us. So, but we, because we're a spin out of another company, the founders, Mark and Matt, Mark Harbottle and Matt Mitrovic out of SitePoint, we had some means. So we sort of had a benevolent parent, if you like, and it was like they were giving us a garage for free. And so very early on, we had to have the discipline of washing our own face, if you would like, but we sort of had some free infrastructure, and over time we had to pay for our infrastructure and things like that. And their philosophy was they had primarily bootstrapped SitePoint from 1999. And that, there was a little bit of mistrust, quite frankly, about the VC environment. So we actually said no a lot to sort of those approaches. And it was really when, I moved to San Francisco in January of 2011, 10, that we started to get a lot closer to the VC community there, fostered really strong relationships with folks like Andrew Bratcher at Excel. And then ultimately, I was in a position to say to Mark and Matt, hey, this is a really good route for us to take. And we were then confident that we knew what to spend money on. I think one of the downsides of being a bootstrapped business that relies on word of mouth is marketing was something that we had to learn. And it took us a long time, and certainly uncovered when we first started. We sort of thought there was this hypothesis that spending was easy and acquiring customers would be easy. And in fact, it proved relatively difficult and uncovered a whole lot of weaknesses in our business. So I think if you did it all again, I would encourage people to bring some of that discipline into their startups early, because you actually learn a lot from being forced to acquire customers rather than just, waiting for them to arrive at your doorstep.
It sounds like in some ways, those bootstrap beginnings and those constraints, having that in your DNA is probably serving you quite well right now. So we're going to come back to that, but I do want to fast forward now to 2020.
Sure.
And so Patrick, on March 9th, you and I were hanging out down by Torquay over the long weekend.
Yes.
My partner Jody, who runs Uber Eats for ANZ and now Asia, and I were talking about coronavirus and how our respective businesses were tracking and responding to the mounting issue on a daily basis. And I have to say, at some point we saw your face kind of go white as a ghost. And I think it felt to me like you were beginning, around that time to kind of ingest what was around the horizon. So where was your head at when we had that conversation on March 9th? And then walk us through the timeline for you and 99designs for that week and where you guys are right now.
Yeah. So, it certainly had been building, obviously. We've got a relatively large team in Berlin. And so certainly they were, obviously what was happening in Europe was very front of mind for them. And so we certainly were becoming aware of what this crisis could mean in February. So I was kind of on board, and we were starting to have conversations internally about, well, when does the Berlin team go to work from home? Then the Valley started to switch to work from home. And so we started to see some big offices, Google, Facebook, etc., make that move. That was then sort of top of mind. So we were certainly talking about it internally. That long weekend, though, was really a watershed moment in just how much I ingested. So I think prior to seeing you, I actually listened to a podcast, the Macro Voices podcast, which is not one that I typically listen to, but it was one that was suggested by a friend and co-founder of another business here in Australia. And it was from actually a replay from January 23, I think. And so Macro Voices was well ahead of the curve of the impact of what we could be seeing. And it was kind of that, oh shit, this is really playing out like they thought it might way back then. And this was serious. And so when I saw you, I was kind of in already fairly heightened anxiety mode. As my family would attest to you, my mother, I took her to to lunch the day before, and she said we weren't allowed to talk about it because she disagreed with my concerns about how bad this all was. And so then you kind of sort of helped ignite that. And, you know, and I think if you wanted, and I think we were also, like, if you remember, I was right in the heart of practically assessing what was next. I was due to fly out to San Francisco in 48 hours.
Yep.
I was kind of on the fence. Do I fly? Do I not? Jodie had just returned from travel. She was like, oh, mate, you know, I think even at that point, we're like, maybe you can if it's important, you know, and I had a board meeting come up. I had a whole lot of reasons why I wanted to be in the Bay Area, but ultimately I decided not to go, which was a pretty good call because, you know, I had other friends who ended up getting stuck. And then it took off from there, right? So it was an intense, it's hard to believe that's a little over a month ago. It feels like almost a lifetime ago, but, you know, we had, you know, for me, the 12th of March is kind of the COVID moment. We had been noticing a little bit of softening in our markets and some activity business-wise leading up to that in the week prior. And then we had a meeting on the Australian 12th, so just before the US 12th, where, you know, I kind of brought our leadership team together and said, okay, this is it. This is crisis mode. And I think, you know, everything I'm learning is suggesting that business as usual stopped as of today. And then we went straight into what was, now I realized, you know, crisis management 101.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing. You know, we always talk about startups, you know, acting, it's like dog years, like a day in a startup is like a year in real life. And never has this been more true than during this crisis.
Yeah. And it was intense. Like, I'm just thinking about it. We went from sort of this moment where the senior leaders could see from me and my messaging that, okay, everything, like what we were about to talk about, I just took off the agenda, you know, and I'm like, we're not going in this Q2 planning, we're not talking about, because Q2 planning is not what we think it is today, right? We have to take shape. We have to address what's coming because it's very different to what we've been leading up to.
So talk to me specifically about this crisis management. You know, in my conversation with you, it sounds like you guys thought about some scenarios, especially right now where there's so much unknown. You know, we don't have playbooks necessarily that we can follow. So what did crisis management look like for you and the team? What were some of the areas that you thought through, and how did you scenario plan for those?
Yeah, so we immediately just went to, okay, so one, the cadence of our communication went daily. Like, so, you know, Saturday morning, we're on call, something like, we literally just worked through like essentially a 7-day period where we're like back to, we're on, and it was about analyzing data. So it was quickly, okay, let's make sure that we've got a good handle on our financial situation. What is exactly, you know, looking at cash management, and then starting the scenario plan. We quickly created a dashboard, which, you know, the COVID dashboard. So I think within days, our analytics team, with maybe even 24 hours, we had something to start to review, which was like basically a timer so we could track what impact we were seeing. And then we just began divvying up as a management team responsibilities. So one responsibility was like, let's build a worst case scenario financial model. What does the world look like if, you know, quite frankly, we went to an extreme? You know, we wake up and half our business has disappeared. Okay, what does survival look like under that scenario? And so we started to do some scenario analysis on that. We quickly did you know, all hands on deck. Where can we save money? And you know, it's amazing what you can do. I think within 48 hours, we rustled up a couple of $100,000 in annualized saving, you know, like that. And then we started to identify a whole lot of other opportunities that would take some additional work. So we sort of just went straight into that mode of operation. And then that quickly went to a new set of priorities for the team, a new set of planning objectives. And really, it was amazing to see everyone rally. It wasn't just, you know, leadership team. At first, that was the first wave. And then as we started to, you know, communicate more broadly with our teams. And for me, it meant a lot more individual communication with teams. So like, you know, attending the engineering manager's weekly meeting, et cetera, so that where they could hear firsthand from me and ask questions firsthand from me. And then we quickly evolved. And so we changed tact, went to 2 weeks, we always operated in 2 week sprints, but we broke planning up into much more actionable items. We basically set a plan for the next 6 weeks, and we started to execute against that. And so really shortened timeframes. And it actually reminded me of much more earlier startup type stuff. Where things come from left field as an early startup, and you deal with them at the time, and you sort of jump from almost one crisis to another. And this was sort of reliving that and getting back that muscle memory. So in some ways it's actually quite exciting.
I'm going to come back to that because I want to talk about, the ways in which this feels like day one to you again. But I wanted to just touch on a point. So many of the people who are dialed in now are, founders themselves, are leading teams. And, you talked about having that communication, getting more, down at the team level. How did you project the right balance of a sense of urgency while also positivity to make sure that the team has the kind of the mentality and the energy that you need from them in a time like this?
Yeah, so for us, we quickly rallied around the fact that our business model is all about connecting people online to do work, and that the future was being brought towards us. And so actually for us, we were like, it was a great reminder to say, hey, we're in a business that's been facilitating this for 12 years. We know how to do this. We have a mantra internally. So we have some, values and guiding principles and things like that, like most businesses. But, unlike a lot of startups, that one of ours is to be profitable. And so we kind of have a DNA of, sharing a lot of financial information and tracking our business towards goals. And one of those goals is to be profitable. It's not, and really profitable for us is about maintaining break even, so that we've always, we've had this sense of wanting to maintain an ability to always be, self-sufficient, have an ability, because we believe in the cause. We rally around the fact that, we're here to champion creativity and bring opportunity to people around the world. And because that's core to our DNA, it's core to our mission, we know that if we do that, and we can do that in a sustainable way, we can keep doing it. And we could rally around like, this is really important what we do. We have a global community of designers who rely on us, who have built great careers on the back of our platform. How do we continue to support them? It's on us. Shit's changing all around us. We need to pivot, find new ways to bring opportunity to those folks. And if we do that, will obviously help us as a group, and we're all going to have to sacrifice. And I think we just saw everyone rally around that and feel good. And I think in some ways, we had some feedback. It's been interesting. I had one say, initially they thought our response was so rapid, and the pivot, like that sort of change in mindset, like people got a bit rattled by it a little bit, like, hey, what does that mean for us financially? But then I think as the crisis unfolded, they realized that we were actually acting really well, like promptly. And I think it built confidence in us as a leadership group, because they're like, oh shit, our leaders are actually responding to this, in a really considered, thoughtful way, and with a real sense of urgency, which perhaps we hadn't been seeing, particularly from some global leaders who were telling us not to worry about anything, it will be okay.
Absolutely. So I want to touch upon your community, because, that is the lifeblood of your business.
Yeah.
And, I asked about how you kind of rallied the troops within your team, but how did you engage with your community, especially as they're so globally dispersed, so diverse, in their personal situations and experiences? So how did you, how are you continuing to engage with your community? How are you collecting data and feedback from them? And how are you thinking about, sustaining that relationship through this time?
Yeah, so a big hub for us is we have a very active forum. So sort of immediately we use that as a sort of a communication hub, and got out and said to our community, sort of priority one was if there was any designers who were struggling under these new circumstances, or in fact even found themselves, battling illness, then we were here to support them. So we sort of created up dedicated support and email support around COVID-19, and so that they could reach out to us and we could try and help facilitate support in any way that we could. And, you know, whether it be handing work from one designer to another and then helping that designer maintain ultimately that customer relationship, but just helping facilitate, bringing the community together to support each other. So that was kind of the central theme. You know, we've used some email and, you know, various channels to communicate with them, but that kind of has been a central hub. And has proven to be, you know, reasonably effective today, because it is a very active and engaged community, and giving them a sense of a way in which they could support each other and that we were here. And what was really sweet was, you know, we've dealt with a global community for a long time, and this is not the first crisis that we've had to support, right? Like, you know, we've seen tsunamis, we've seen typhoons, we've seen major flooding, we've seen earthquakes, we've seen, you know, so there's, like, different people in different parts of the world who are part of our community have experienced really significant hardship. And so, you know, it was actually amazing to see our community recognize that and say, hey, when I had this issue, 99designs was there to support me. So when they say that they're here to support us, you can trust in that.
Amazing. You guys are so lucky, either by luck or by design. You have so many of those essential ingredients that are playing out now, but, you know, how to be bootstrapped and kind of cash conservative, how to work as a, you know, dispersed, distributed team, how to engage, you know, your global community around these disasters. So, yeah, well done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we're still learning. I think one of the things that I will point out, and this, you know, for us working distributedly, like, we've had satellite offices, but we've been pretty hub and spoke in a way. And so this is a new, and so part of the challenge I felt was I'm very much a lot of the time, a lot of my leadership is kind of presence based, and I love being around the team. I love being in the office. I don't work from home that often typically. And even though, you know, I have a bit of a commute to get to work, I still, like, you know, it's part of what I like to do. And so it was amazing to go like so rapidly into, now we're all working remote. And okay, how do you get that sense of connection with your team? And so it has been for us as a way of working internally. It certainly has been a change, and we're still adapting and learning. And so I don't think we're the experts on that. And so we're, like everyone else, sort of learning as we go, but our communities are experts, and our customers have only ever worked with our designers in an online environment. And so that we're drawing from what we can from them, as well as, you know, the knowledge that our business model is obviously well suited. And so, for, you know, the challenge for us now is to make sure that we find the opportunity and tailor our offering so that we're well positioned when people are ready to get back to work.
Well, you certainly, the team, you know, by nature is gathering quite a bit of empathy for your community and customers on how you engage remotely and kind of build those skills. I want to go back to something that you had said where, how in many ways this is kind of like day one. It's like early days of being a startup, in spite of you being now, you know, 12 plus years old. And in a conversation with us, you kind of talked about getting back to first principles. So tell me what that means to you, and how you guys are operating almost like your day one. I feel like this will be so relevant to the folks on the call right now who might be in the early stages of their company, to see that we have someone who's, you know, 12 years on in the journey coming back to day one. Tell us a little bit about what that means for you guys.
Yeah, so for us, it meant exactly that. Like, okay, we've got some hypotheses that we think will come. Like, you know, there'll be a trend for businesses needing to get online. How do we make sure that we've got offerings to support businesses to do that? You know, the core of the 99designs business has been, you know, obviously we do a lot of different things, but creatively with design, but we do a lot of branding. And we could see that, you know, there was some, when people are dealing with an immediate crisis or lots of news, or quite frankly, we see it, there's a B2C characteristic. If there's a public holiday, people aren't working, we see sort of dips in our traffic and the projects. And so we certainly saw that, and we're like, okay, well, if maybe for a little period of time, there'll be less businesses looking to brand, what will they need to be doing? And okay, well, let's build some hypothesis around what we think, you know. So we built some new hypotheses around taking businesses online, the need for marketers and other people to build distributed teams as they start to cope with this new work environment. So this notion of building remote creative teams. And like, okay, now what can we do to get out and prove that? So it was back to, rapid iteration of the homepage, bringing search front and center, and then, creating a new offer to test, and then putting some account managers against that and testing those offers. And then, sort of feedback loops, capturing that data. And then we went back to first principles. We've done some research projects. So we've engaged our UX team and our research team have done an amazing job of being at the forefront of this. So working with customer support and our account management team and our designer support teams to, do interviews of our current users. We've been doing that in person as well as, survey based, just to really understand what's changed for people.
Yeah.
We were changing rapidly, and we sort of, startup world, we'd use the word pivot pretty readily, but we were actually, we were thinking everyone in our world was probably being forced to pivot. So what can we learn about that? And so we did some research just around that, like what's changed for people, whose businesses are being impacted, what are they thinking about now? Is that different to what they were thinking at pre-crisis?
And Patrick, I think it's probably a blessing in disguise for your business and for so many, because, what I've seen is that sometimes companies can get a little comfortable, right? So they go from being very customer-led to then having a very tight product roadmap that's looking out at the next 12 months, and they end up getting product-led, and they forget to kind of check back in on some of these first principles, getting really intimate with customer, identifying what are the pain points you're solving for. So this is actually a great opportunity for you guys to, check back in with your customers and, like you said, build up that muscle in case it had atrophied a bit.
That's right. And it was ironically, it was an extension, and we had felt as a leadership team at the end of last year that we had gotten away from some of those things. And so we actually built that into our 2020 business plan, was like, hey, we've got to get back to this. And so this was actually a really nice way to reinforce it on steroids, right? And so, and so we were building some of this already, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, great. Now we know why we were building towards this, because it's more important than ever.
Yeah.
And so then we were able to sort of reinforce that messaging, and then as a team rally around it. And I think it's been amazing to see just how everyone right across our organizations pull together.
I have a lighting issue. Give me 1 second. I'm back. Patrick, to that point, what are some of the things that, whether it's, new muscles or new tricks or new practices that you guys are learning, whether it's how you work as a team, whether it's how you engage with customers, that you're actually going to, bring forward and that you're going to have be, a new part of day-to-day practice?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, we had been transitioning. So like, if you think about that journey that you were talking about, when I joined 99designs, we didn't have a business plan at all. Right. So then we kind of started building business plans and like financial forecasts, because that was part of, the muscle memory that I was talking about. We needed to develop as an organization, because we were literally in the early days, we were just managed by cash balance. And so we sort of moved down that path of that discipline. And then, to your point, yearly type plans. And this year and over the last 12 months, we've been trying to move back to much more quarterly based planning. And now we find ourselves almost in like this sort of like, we're not quite sure where we're at, because we're learning as we go, but it feels like it's a 6 to 8 weeks type cadence and really focusing on fast delivery. So trying to chunk things up to smaller pieces like never before and deliver quickly, so that we're getting feedback loops sort of quicker than perhaps we did in the past.
Especially when information is changing on a daily basis.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's right. Like a lot of, because part of what you were talking about is you've been in business for a long time. For many of us, we can have preconceived ideas around what the solutions need to be. And so we challenged ourselves that we need to challenge that and make sure that we get out of our comfort zone and revalidate assumptions. But now those assumptions have just changed, right? And our clients and designers' needs have changed due to this pandemic. And so we're adapting. And so for us, we're really focused as an organization right now on delivering helping customers get online. And so working with some partners like Squarespace and Square, and, you know, looking at other solution providers that we can help support, you know, make sure that, because we've always done website design and app design from a design perspective, but we're not necessarily helped people get, you know, transitioned to a fully functioning website. You know, we have had a partnership with Jimdo for a long time, a German-based website builder that was relatively small functionality. And so now we're like working hard on how can we help small business owners get online as fast as possible with the support of our community, and what platforms best suit that. And then, you know, we're out testing new stuff around supporting teams, marketers, you know, looking at what are the problems we need to solve around everyday design for, you know, bigger, more established businesses, as well as, you know, ultimately what sort of high-end creativity we can help bring to those as well. So different folks working on different parts, and then trying to make sure that we absorb that information collectively as a group. So, you know, I think we've always been big Atlassian users, or, you know, their Confluence tool, and you know, the wiki is a pretty important part of our organization, just because we've always had teams in Oakland and Australia and Berlin. And so that has been an important repository for us, but now it's even more important than ever.
I actually want to talk about, you know, focus and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It is so important for you as a leader and for your team to have as much focus and discipline. It's ever more important right now. Sometimes deciding what not to do is just as important as deciding what to do. And so I actually just want us to kind of go back, you know, before this whole crisis, and think about an example where, you know, you had to make some tough decisions in order to be really focused and disciplined. So I'm thinking about Swiftly.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2013, when you launched that service, which was, you know, quick fixes for that flat fee of, I think it was $15. And about 18 months later, you made the tough decision to kind of shut that down.
Yeah.
So tell me about what was behind that decision. And just in general, as a leader, how you think about really continuing to refine what it is that you do and what it is that you won't do. And what you're learning from that going forward.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the discipline of being bootstrapped, or, you know, for us now to be break even, is that there is a limit, there's a finite amount of resources that you have. And so I think that helps create discipline in itself, right? Because you can't spray everywhere, because, you know, you're looking at and you're trying to make sure that you maximize what you have, what resources you have. And obviously our resources are significantly bigger than, you know, a startup, and like a lot of people listening to this call, but, you know, that the same tenets apply. You're looking at it and going, okay, what can I do with the people I have? And how do I maximize the impact and value of that? The Swiftly one is one where, you know, the bar gets set pretty high. If we were a bootstrap startup all over again, and Swiftly probably would have got funded, and we would have, you know, you'd have been away, because we saw good adoption. We had customers who loved it. We had designers who loved it. We were actually pretty passionate about it as a service. But what we learned was ultimately it wasn't getting the traction that we needed at our scale as a standalone entity. And we relearned some hard lessons around just how hard it is to build a brand, how hard it is to, you know, spend. You know, we were only just getting good at spending money against our own sophisticated site at 99designs, and now having to divert spend to a new brand. And so ultimately we could rationalize the decision with the team around common sense, right? Like and just reiterating why we were making these decisions based on evidence that we were building. And, you know, so for us, it was as simple as like, hey, we can spend $1 here, or we can spend $1 there. And you can see that the return on this dollar is significantly better if we spend it here on the core brand of 99designs. This functionality we love, and ultimately we want to be able to bring it back into the core platform, but we're continuing to build it on its own domain, on its own code base, was just, we were replicating a whole lot of infrastructure that we already had. This didn't make sense from an engineering and technical perspective. And then, you know, there was the fact that, you know, you could spend time with customer support and hear them spelling out Swiftly as they were trying to help customers transition from 99designs to another product. And so we were able to talk to the teams and say, hey, you can see that this needs to be something that we build back. And so we had a promise at that point that someday we'll get to the point where we can real-time match and allow customers and designers to meet in a much faster fashion than they could on 99designs. And now we can do that. So that functionality is being built into our platform. And so we're ever so slower than any of us would like, because we love that product, getting closer to being able to deliver.
Having to bring it.
You know, and I think if you bring it back to today and focus and making hard decisions, which a lot of people are having to do, I think what I've learned is you need to communicate it broadly, right? And if you spend time communicating, like, so first for me, I always find that I start with the leadership team at 99. And so I'll come to them with an idea or something that I think is important, and then have them challenge it and stress test it. And then as we get comfortable with it and they say, yes, you're right, actually, we agree, this is something that we should be tackling or something we should be stopping, then we go forward. Or quite frankly, I'm getting challenged all the time too, right? Like, that's the good thing. Like, hey, we don't think it makes sense for us to be continuing to build this functionality in this code base. We should stop. Okay, you know, so like the Swiftly one, you know, I was actually pretty enamored with it as a service, and had spent a lot of time daydreaming about the brand name and a whole lot of stuff. So to give it up, you know, but it was a collective decision. We bounced it off each other, we got comfortable with it, and then we talked about, okay, well, then communicating that more broadly across the organization and getting buy-in.
Yeah, never easy to kill the babies.
No, it's hard, right? And so we've killed quite a few things. We generally always regret them, right? Because you're like, oh, you love everything that you create. And you know, we're trying to build greater discipline. I think we all recognize one of the pitfalls of taking a MVP approach to things, or like this test and learn. Sometimes you get tests out and you forget to take them away. Right? And so we certainly as an organization are constantly trying to remind ourselves that we need to have discipline on cutting away again once we've learned, and trying to maintain, you know, a relatively lean operation.
They say, you know, the elegance is not what you add, but what you take away. So that makes sense. Yeah. We're going to jump over to questions in just a moment. But I just want to ask you, and I just want to end on a positive note, Patrick. What's your hope for all of us on the other side of this crisis? So what would be the best possible outcome for you, for 99designs, for startups, or more generally?
I mean, one, I think we all come away embracing and getting a whole lot better at this remote work thing. I think, you know, for us, our big hope at 99 is that this makes remote working mainstream. And so for us as an organization, for our community, for our clients, like this will become, like we've been seeing this, like the Uberization of the world. And, you know, we've talked about this before, but, you know, Uber coming along helped, because we started to see businesses do things like, oh, well, if I can call up a car on my phone, what other services can I get? And we've seen an explosion of service offerings across the sort of demand economy. And we've certainly benefited from that. And I think this is another watershed moment that we've got the position to, you know, hopefully take advantage of as organizations decide, after working this way, and I think we're all going to be probably working this way for an extended period of time. Okay, well, let's not go back to exactly how it was, or, you know what, accessing great talent from a remote basis, I've gotten used to that. So now how can I do that at scale? And, you know, I think 99designs is really well positioned to take advantage of that. So for us, we're certainly at that point of like, cool, the future has been brought forward. Let's embrace it. Let's see, you know, we're also acknowledging that, you know, so whilst there's a whole lot of exciting elements to it, it could be a really rough road for a lot of us over 6 months, 12 months as this plays out. And so you've got to kind of batten down the hatches a little bit and build for when people are ready to come back, and when they need to pivot. And so I think we're seeing some evidence that it'll be interesting to see how quickly people do come back. But, you know, we're very hopeful that, you know, it's on us to take advantage of this opportunity organizationally. And so then for society, you know, I think we will all be better off if we do this more often, right? It does give us one of the downsides is we can all work all of the time. one of the upsides though is that we are closer to our families, and you and I have talked about this, and even last night I finished with a call with you at 5:30 and jumped in the car and drove down and picked up my son from the ocean and took my 6-year-old into the ocean for half an hour. Like, I don't get to do that on a normal work day because I'm still commuting or doing whatever. So, I can see some upside, and being closer to family, over time we should be closer to our community, because we're forced to sort of think a bit more locally and in the space that we're around, rather than the office or the plane that we were spending a lot of our times in. I think there could be some really great community benefits that come from that. And, the environment's going to get a bit of a holiday from, so there's some, amongst what is a really tragic time, I think some real sense of optimism. And if we can embrace it and use this as a catalyst for change, then, we'll all come out better off.
Yeah, hear, hear. All right, Rohit, I'll cut over to you. Do you have any questions that have come in from the participants?
We do. Patrick and Rachel, thank you so much for that fantastic discussion and insights. So just quickly, we're going to switch over to questions from people that submitted them during the registration process, as well as questions that have been submitted through this discussion so far. Just a quick reminder that if you have a question for Patrick or Rachel, just make sure that you submit them via the Q&A tab. The first question is around, obviously there would be a range of different impacts that are taking place for 99designs, Patrick, at the moment. What are some of the more interesting or unexpected impacts on your business or trends that you're seeing, both from a 99designs perspective or for your community of designers as well?
Yeah, interesting. So I think so far a lot of our assumptions have borne true. I mean, the one thing that I think has been wonderful is just how the team has rallied, and how we've come together, even though we can't physically be together. The way that I've seen the team come together during this crisis, just how quickly we've reminded ourselves, I think, how quickly we can actually move. And we're all sitting back 5 weeks later, and it does feel like a long 5 weeks where you're like, oh shit, look how much we've moved, adjusted, changed. So I think they're all really I think that in some ways has been really pleasant on the upside, because we were learning a new way of working, right? Like, teams have been forced to work in a distributed way for the first time. Engineering teams have had daily stand-ups standing next to each other for as long as we've been operating at 99designs, right? And we've just had to break that and do that in a new way, but we're still delivering. We're actually delivering at a faster pace than we ever had before. So I think, that's been really awesome for me internally. I think from a designer's perspective, we've seen a lot of interest in our platform. So there's been, a significant upturn in people looking to join 99designs. And so, we're working hard to process registrations, but we're also, for us, it's an opportunity to really make sure that we're setting the bar really high and bringing in the best quality talent at this time. So that's been, I think I thought that we would see people looking for new ways to generate income, but that has certainly borne out. And so we have seen a nice uplift there. And that our customers have this amazing sense of resilience, right? Like, what we're seeing is that, the customers we do have, and they're coming back relatively quickly, are embracing this, right? Now, a bunch of them are telling us that they're needing to do that out of necessity, but a lot of them have been thinking about this and daydreaming about doing this. And now this is a forcing function, so that view of, I want to establish a side hustle, or I want to switch in career. Now, maybe that's being forced upon people, but people are embracing that change and going, you know what, now this is the time to go start something for myself. And so I think that's pretty exciting.
The next question is probably for both of you. Patrick, more from a 99designs perspective and a fundraising perspective, but obviously Rachel from an angel investment and probably more of a VC lens as well. This question specifically is from Jeff Measy, who is looking to bring forward the launch of his product because COVID actually presents a really good opportunity for his business. But obviously for a range of different startups, the whole uncertainty around investment is a really big question mark at the moment. So for those companies that are looking to currently fundraise, what are some of the strategies that they can use to help engage investors and potentially lock in investment in the short term to help them sort of bridge the gap or the runway. And is that the right way that they should be approaching things as well? Patrick, you kind of mentioned, you know, the 99designs focus was to focus on bootstrapping for a while. So just really curious to know from both your perspectives what your insight would be.
Rachel, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. Listen, I can tell you what, you know, we're hearing from investors here in Australia, at least. There's still quite a bit of dry powder in the VC funds, and they are looking to invest. That said, when I think companies that were probably investable a few months ago, the bar might have shifted. And in particular, what they're looking for is that round of funding going to be runway that is probably going to last 18 months. And that's because we have an uncertain funding future ahead of us. And so while there might be lots of dry powder now, we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know how long economic conditions might exist and what they might look like. But if we look at the GFC as a proxy, we are hoping that cash is going to stretch much longer than it would previously. So I think, you know, my advice is if you have a great product that's meeting a customer need, and you're able to build relationships with investors that, you know, buy into your vision and to what your team can achieve. And that money is going to be difference making. Either it gives you the speed or some sort of competitive advantage to get out there, then, you know, take the money. But just know that I think some of the kind of metrics that investors are looking for have changed slightly. So in particular on how long cash will last, you know, what that ROI is going to be. And probably will have an impact on what valuations are right now. So yeah, money's out there, but I think that, you know, the way in which we assess opportunities is shifting. Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I've always been a proponent of like social validation, customer validation, anything that you can do to build credibility around your startup story is something that I've always believed can help in engaging investors. Like I think we've found, and Rachel's, you know, an active investor and part of the ecosystem, probably more so than I am because I'm sort of past that in some ways. Investors are generally, in my opinion, that they gravitate to opportunities that they can validate really easily. And so I think at these times where funding is going to be harder, right? Like what is for sure is there is a moment where people go, what does this mean? So 4 to 6 weeks, you know, there's probably a lot, unless you were actively in discussions with people, it's unlikely something new is starting right now, right? Like that's going to be the hardest thing to do. So you have to pick your timing there and make, you know, get those conversations started at the right time. What's the best way, in my opinion, to get those conversations started is have people call you because what you're doing is really interesting or is really valid to the situations in which we see ourselves. And so if you've got something that you think is really is built for these times and something that can support, you know, our response, then what can you do to get some validation of that, be it in the press, be it socially, you know, be it early adopter, beta customers. These are all the sorts of tactics that I'd highly recommend because it's going to take time. Everything will be a bit slower, I suspect, in this funding cycle. People are going to, due diligence will get harder. That's what we've seen in these sorts of periods before. Deals always get done. Like there'll be a period of no deal and then deals will come back and they'll get done, but they can be a bit slower. They will be on different terms, you know. You might have to accept things that you perhaps thought you wouldn't have had in the past, but yeah, you'll still be able to get it done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of calling people, very conscious that the majority of people probably have a backlog of Zoom calls to get through today. So we're going to make sure that we try and give everyone a little bit of time back today and wrap up a few minutes early. But last question, Patrick, and both you and Rachel mentioned kind of the need to conserve cash and be really conscious of how you're spending your resources. Mm-hmm. So the question from Dax Brito is around how did you mitigate early marketing and community building in the early years? Did you hire or just keep learning? When was the breakthrough of marketing seen?
So we didn't really see a breakthrough in marketing. I mean, we tested intermittently from the get-go. So we spent a bit, you know, intermittently to test that. For us, our breakthrough didn't come until really the 3-year mark when we sort of drastically changed our conversion funnel and all of a sudden spend started to work. And so for us, I think for us marketing, we've always been pretty metric focused. And so if we couldn't see a return on investment, then it was hard for us to continue to do it because there was very limited capital in the organization. But once we saw that we had unlocked something and we could see that we were getting a return on our investment relatively quickly, then it gave us the confidence to go raise money because we could say, hey, we can spend more. We also were able to spend more of our own money because we were more and more confident in the result of that. So, that's quite a long horizon. I don't know if I recommend that today, but it does depend on how much cash you've got. And so I'm certainly a proponent on, satisfying the customers you have, learning from them, building, scalable, great solutions as step one, and then acquisition being step two. On the community front, we were lucky that we came out of an amazing forum in SitePoint. So we had already a community to start with. We didn't have to build a community from scratch. And then once we did, if people find opportunity, then they talk about it. Like still today, I think 40% of our customers come through word of mouth. We don't spend any money really on acquiring designers other than investing in having great content for them to consume, via our blog and supporting them and having active forums and doing those sorts of things. But we really don't, some community-based activities, but we don't really spend a lot on designer acquisition. And what we find is that word of mouth will drive that people to us. And so just continuing to focus on good outcomes, is key.
Fantastic. Patrick and Rachael, thank you once again for facilitating the very first session in this content series with Innovation Bay. As we mentioned, and thank you all as well for joining us. Hope you were able to take some really important sort of nuggets and insights away that you can go away and apply to your own startups. As we mentioned at the start, this is the first of a weekly series that we're now launching. So next week we have a session that we're running with Dr. Toby Ford on again, being really conscious that this is a very difficult time period for founders. We wanted to run a discussion around frameworks for performance management and just creating better resilience across both founders as well as your teams. So that'll be a fantastic session that we run from 12 to 1 p.m. next Thursday. And then following that, we have another great set of speakers lined up, including Jodie Oster, who's the GM of Uber Eats, Simon Griffiths from Who Gives a Crap, and Jane Martino from Smiling Minds as well, to kind of talk about founder mental health. So once again, Patrick, thank you for your time, as well as Rachael, and thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at the same time next week.
Thanks, everyone. See you next Thursday.
Yeah, thank you. See you again.